Okay, alright, so this is now the second part of the video, alright, of pure culture techniques. Now, we go now to dispensing media into plates. Now, you know, in your culture media preparation, we had a video on that, alright? And it's really important that when we dispense culture media into plates, we limit and avoid good as much as possible the introduction of contaminants to these culture media. That is why we want to make sure that we always work near the flame. Actually, it's a rule of thumb in bacteriology that you always need to work near the flame if you're not working in a BSC, like in your countertops, not tabletops. Because again, this would in a way limit or prevent the introduction of contaminants in your culture and culture media. So when you come to dispensing, dapat again, actually it's quite wrong, dapat medyo delicate siya na naka-open, alright? Unless na lang if naka sa BSC, but if you're in a countertop, dapat hindi kayo na naka-open. And there should be a flame near you, like an alcohol lamp or a Bunsen burner. Because again, this will promote at least an aseptic environment kung asa ka nagtrabaho. Okay? Alright, so again, that's for dispensing media into plates. Alright, now next, when we come to pipetting, we use always a sterile pipette. In AK, if we have culture activities na magamit ng pipette, we use the serological pipette, and then ginarap na siya paper. If narap na siya paper, meaning na-autoclave na siya. Alright, so you just peel the paper or mo na siyang i-open once gamitin na siya. And if gamitin na siya, or like once ma-open na, it should not touch any other surfaces aside from the culture media na kung asa i-dispense ang inoculum. Okay? And once mo gamit, dapat ibalik siya sa container or i-dispose or ibutang siya o a container na na-disinfectant. Okay? Especially if serological pipette. But if disposable ang pipette, then of course we dispose it sa proper containers, garbage containers. Okay? Alright. Now we now go to your isolation methods when it comes to plates like Petri dishes. So you have different types. You have straight plate. First is your multiple interrupted streak, the most common. Next you have the multiple overlap and grid streak. Next, you have spread plate, okay? And then pour plate. Now, for enrichment methods or enrichment techniques, when we want to, again, let a certain organism proliferate muna, and you have serial dilution, okay? So, and single cell isolation, meaning you want to isolate lang a specific cell or a specific bacterial organism. Okay, now, first one is your plating methods. We'll start first with multiple interrupted streak. It's usually for isolation good and colonial characterization. Usually, this is the most commonly used method of isolation. And ang ginagamit usually is a loop, creating loop. Now, why do we say it's multiple interrupted? So let's say you have a culture medium and then you are yet to introduce an inoculum. So you introduce an inoculum usually at one side, and usually sa video ko na mo introduce, na siya i-label ang inyong plates sa likod. So dito na siya ibutang ang inoculum starting. So usually a drop lang of the inoculum using a loop, and then finally you streak the first quadrant. Ayan. So from here you streak the first quadrant, and then after streaking you heat the loop. Okay? Muna siya interrupted. Kaya after you streak sa first quadrant, you flame, and then i-flame po ng loop. Okay? Alright. That would make sure na dili na kayo ma-over inoculum, and also ang contaminants ma-prevent. Okay, next one is of course from the first quadrant. After heating, you streak the second quadrant. Usually you touch that from the first quadrant mga once or twice. So 1 or 2. Pwede po once and then diretso mag-streak here. That's for your second quadrant. Ayan. That's the second quadrant. Usually you touch that once or twice. Depende na nimo. Pero ako usually once or twice ko touch. Pero okay na. Once touching the first quadrant once would suffice na. Okay. And then flame na po the loop. And then, after flaming, after na mo dry or hindi na mainit, streak na po ka the second quadrant, touch ka for the third quadrant. Ayan. Okay. Mayroon pa mga resources and labs na photograph third quadrant, but we'll follow Maymon, and according to Maymon, tututao fourth quadrant. So again, after shooting the third quadrant, you flame the loop, and then you now streak for the fourth quadrant by touching it again sa third quadrant. Ayan. So that's your multiple interrupted streak. When you say multiple interrupted, kada kumanin mo quadrants, you flame the loop. So na-interrupt yung mga streaking. Dili continuous. Okay? Alright, that's for multiple interrupted. The most common na itong ginagamit ko na isolation method sa plates. Okay? Next, you have your multiple overlap. This is usually used for antimicrobial susceptibility testing. Kung sa itong culture media ganyan for antimicrobial susceptibility testing, your Mueller, Hinton, Agar, MHA. Alright, and what we use is your cotton swab, a sterile cotton swab, okay? We'll have a discussion on antimicrobial susceptibility testing later na in the laboratory. But for this, we'll talk about multiple overlap. So we'll start first with, you introduce the inoculum as always, at the middle, okay? And then you streak sa 4 sides. So you streak up, down, and left, right, and left, okay? And then finally, you continue siya, you streak first layer. Anak lang. Hindi mo siya nang streak first layer. Always make sure na dapat close na together. Okay? Like, close ang mga distances sa streaking nimo. Alright? Because you want to make sure na ma-cover niya siya ng bacteria. A lawn of bacteria. Okay? Then after, i-heat sa nimo ang imong plate. And then, twist nimo siya gamay, ang imong plate. And then, streak na po the second layer. That's the first overlap. Ayan, overlap na po. Okay? Until yung mapulong na siya. Okay, you twist na po the plate to one side. Okay? Alright? And then you streak for the third layer. Ayan. So meaning, basically nag-overlap ang mga colonies or overlap yung mga pag-streak. Because again, what you want to have is a lawn. Like, yung plate is puno yun na siya kagaw. Like baga ang growth. Because again, you want to test for antibiotic susceptibility. Okay? Alright. And after the third quadrant, or the third layer, you rim the sides, getting sides. That will ensure na again, na nagtumutubo sa sides and ma-cover niyo ang whole yun na culture media plate. Okay? And that's for your multiple overlap. Asa siya ginagamit? That's for antimicrobial susceptibility testing. Okay. Next is, rim the plate. Rim the sides. Okay? Next, you have grid streak. Now, for grid streak is for isolation, colonial, and quantitative. Usually, colony counting. So, ginagamit niya siya usually for urine specimens. Because again, for urine specimens or culture, we want to quantitate. We want to count the number of colonies sa inyong urine. Okay? Alright. So, what we use is a calibrated loop. Usually 1 UL, 10 UL, or 100 UL. Again, we have a video to describe that. So, for grid streak, what you do lang is, introduce inoculum. But you put lang sa, instead of, di ba sa multiple overlap kay up and down, left and right, sa grid streak up and down lang, and then after that, you streak na, pahinga. Alright, that's grid streak. Okay? Alright, until the end. Okay. Alright, and, or pwede po siyang individual na pag-streak. Like ano. Or commercial mo siya ipa-curve. Yes naman. Alright. Tinana siya ang grid streak. So, ang purpose na ginana is for colony counting. Mas ma-count na ito ang colonies individually. Because we want to know the number of colonies. Usually, again, ginamit for urine specimens. Urine. Okay. Alright. Next, we have spread plate. Still the same for colony characterization or colony counting. What we do are pipettes or spreaders. We have, here sa AK, sa lab activity, ang spreaders na gamitin is the butt of a tube, like 10 ml or 5 ml tube, muna yung gamitin for spread plate. For other bacteria, other labs, kanila ginagamit, plastic spreader. Okay? But again, that's for colony counting and colonial characterization. That's for spread plate. Okay? Butt of a sterile 5 ml, and usually ato ginagamit na technique lang or procedure is same sa multiple overlap. So, you plate, diba? Up, down, and then streak, and then twist the plate kamay, streak na po for the second layer, and then twist lastly for the third layer. Okay? Again, we have a video explaining that. Don't worry. Okay. Alright, so that's your spread plate. Now we go for pour plating, still for isolation and colony counting. What we do is, sa empty na Petri dish, we introduce na tawag inoculum dito using a pipette. And then after that is, after na ng inoculum, dito pa ka mo pour sa yung culture media. Okay? So after that, once na-incorporate ng inoculum and culture media, we mix it together by swirling. So you first put the inoculum, and then after, buta na ng culture media. Okay? And then dito mo siya i-mix. I-mix mo siya by swirling. Okay? Not applicable siya for colonies embedded in the medium. Example, kanang mga colonies na, ano yung mga colonies tapos siya sa medium. So, dito siya pwede magamit for that, like pour plating. But again, ang purpose niya, it's still for colony characterization and colony counting. Okay? Again, ang point you pour first the inoculum in an empty Petri dish. and then using a pipette, sterile pipette, and then after dito nakamove sa culture medium. And then you mix it by gentle swirling. Okay. Alright, now we go to enrichment techniques. These are measures to increase the population of a certain type of organism. And usually ginagamit siya for fastidious organisms. Because again, fastidious organisms, they're quite difficult to grow because again, the vegetation requirements are needed. So what we need is padaghanin sa siya before nato siya ibutang o plating media. Okay? And for serial dilution, any serial dilution, this is quite, sa IS, sa immunosero, you will discuss this. But what we do is we dilute to obtain bacterial count. So like from one tube, mo dilute na punta for next tube, and then from this tube, ato na siyang i-transfer, and then another tube na. That's for serial dilution. So you want to make sure to determine again for bacterial counts. Okay, but I will not further sa karon for serial dilution. Okay, alright, unya na lang. Okay, and for single cell isolation, you want to only isolate like one cell regular. Basi usually ginagamit siya for viruses or even other types of bacteria. If you only want to isolate one cell. Okay, alright. Ayan. Okay. Now for, of course, tips for successful isolation, tips for Sara. Always observe aseptic techniques. Because again, if you don't follow aseptic techniques, guys, you can introduce a lot of contaminants, right? And this could impede, this could hinder your isolation and identification of your specified or organism or pathogen of understudy nimo. Okay, so always follow aseptic techniques. Tips for avoiding spreaders. Yeah, okay. What you mean by spreaders is kung ang culture media maguni mo, if dili mo siya ipa-cool due to 45 to 47, pwede siyang once ma-incubate siya, release siyang moisture. Okay, now these moisture can in a way, if your culture media is basa manggod, and then because of moisture, right, and then ay colonies na mutubo, what happens is ma-spread siya because of the moisture na nasa culture media. So what you have to do is, again, dapat i-cool sa mo siya to 45 to 47 before mo siya i-dispense mo plates. Because again, ang point ato is, the spreaders or the moisture na makuha from culture media, pagbutan mo sa colonies mo spread to the colonies because of the water or the moisture na naka. Okay, that's for avoiding spreaders. Okay, now we go to stock cultures. Diba? We mentioned about stock cultures we want to preserve for further studying or for future studies, right? So we have a method here. We use a sterile mineral oil or paraffin overlay. Now this would preserve the culture by limiting the access of air and to the bacteria, therefore reducing their metabolic activities because wala sila air. Alright, but basically your paraffin or mineral oil serves as like, it promotes an anaerobic environment para dili lang padayon o gamit ng oxygen ang bacteria para di po sila pagsigi o metabolize and work or like multiply, alright? Para ma-prolong po nila ang life, okay? Alright. This procedure preserves for a long time pero not forever. So wala talaga forever, guys. Even dito sa bacteriology. Okay. So here's an example of a paraffin, a mineral oil or paraffin. So this is a slant, diba? Usually we store sa slant. Okay. Now what you do is a slant, tangan mo siya mineral oil or paraffin overlay. So this is the bacteria na nasa slant, and then you put enough sterile oil or mineral oil to again promote or to limit the access of the bacteria to oxygen. Okay, para dili sila magpadayon mag-grow and multiply. So ma-preserve ang growth. Okay, all right. Now we can also use what we call sterile 80% glycerol. Now because your glycerol acts as a cryoprotective agent. What do you mean by cryoprotective? It protects from ice crystals formation. And mentioned sa culture media, ice crystal formation can damage the media and also the bacteria itself. Okay. And freezing again removes water, and due to the formation of ice crystals, it can have a negative effect on the cells. So it's longer siya with refrigeration. It's longer siya than with refrigeration. So again, we use usually these conical tubes. Alright, liquid culture na may butangan na tayo o sterile 80% glycerol. Alright, so basically, if you want your cultures na gina-preserve by freezing, you want to add a cryoprotective agent, usually in the form of glycerol. Because again, this would prevent the formation of ice crystals, which could have a negative effect on your cells. Okay? Alright. And why do we prepare for stock cultures? Because again, we want to make sure your stock cultures it preserves viability and stability of the organism. Because your stock culture magod, it's your original na culture, right? And kaysa subculturing, this is a demonstration. So your stock culture, you get it from, your stock culture will serve as the primary culture, and then dito na kamukuha from your different pure cultures. Now, in comparison, if usara yung plate, and then masili kang subculture. So, example, pure culture nimo, and then subculture ka, and then from here, another subculture, and what this scenario promotes is cell division or mutation of your bacteria here. And cell variants and mutants. Now, what's the problem, Ana? When you go na to the subculture number 3, possible na mga reactions na mo nakuha from pure culture, subculture 1, dili na mako sa subculture 3 because they have already mutated, they have already adjusted, or they have changed na their genetic materials or their biochem reactions and because again, they have been subcultured sige silang exposed to different environment. So of course, your bacteria tends to adjust, tends to adapt and mutate na sila. So, muna siya important sa stock culture because at least man lang gani, you're always getting from one source lang. And your bacteria is not always subjected or exposed to different environments. Kung in any single subculture, again, your bacteria is prone now to undergo such mutations and changes, which again could affect your future test reactions, especially sa mga biochem or even sa antimicrobial susceptibility testing. Okay? So, if mag-subculture magani daw ka, it's only advisable na until the second subculture. Okay? Because after that, magsige na sila mag-change na sila, mag-start na sila mutate and produce mga cell variants and mutants. Okay? Alright, so basically that's it for pure culture techniques. It's quite short lang. But again, pure culture techniques are one of the, or if not the most basic and most fundamental skills na dapat mag-learn sa usa ka bacteriology student. Under face-to-face with the classes, this would have been fun. You'll get to know how to speak and all. But again, do not despair. We have prepared videos again for these speaking techniques. Basin ma-upload lang in a later part because again, mag-listen mo pang itawag mo edit and all. But rest assured again, we want you will experience, at least experience man lang, or get to see how these pure culture techniques are performed. Okay? Alright, so thank you dears. Again, I hope to see you na po in our next lecture and have a great day. Drink your water always guys and stay safe.